I've never been good at making friends, or any type of bond with people in general. I'm not even close to most of my family members like I'm close to Jessie. Jessie is my best friend. I've known her only for a year and a half, but she's literally my world. She's the only person I can speak to, the only person who understands me. I've never slept over at anyone's house that isn't mine, and even when I'm supposed to be staying at a family member's house I get anxious and they have to call my parents to collect me. This results in my parents having to cancel everything that they plan. My parents resent me. I'm a huge burden to them because of just how anxious I am. Jessie asked if I wanted to have a sleepover at her house. I'd never been to her house, or anyone for that matter, and I'll admit I was ecstatic, but also hesitant, in case I got anxious and ruined the sleepover and my friendship. I knew I was probably overthinking, but it still scared me. Jessie gave me some time to think, and I agreed. I told my parents and they were pretty shocked, but decided to let me go because I had an actual shot at making a best friend for life. The car pulled up onto a large driveway, connected to an even larger house. It was huge, like mansion-sized. Probably the biggest house I'd ever laid eyes on. Me and my parents made our way over to the front door, which was about twice my dad's size, and he was 6 feet 7 inches. There was no doorbell, instead there was an abnormally large silver knocker in the middle of the door. I knocked. Jessie answered the door. When she saw me her face seemed to light up and her smile grew larger. She instantly leaned in for a hug. Jessie's mother and father also approached the door, and stood behind Jessie, also with a comforting smile on their face. Jessie's father was also tall like my own dad. He was your typical dad-looking person. It was the same with her mother too. It was almost surreal. Jessie turned me around her huge house, which took about an hour in itself. Then we ventured off into Jessie's bedroom, which was huge, and pink. Very pink. Like every object was pink. After staying in Jessie's room playing games and eating candy for a while, her mother walked into the room, and placed a sheet of A4 paper on Jessie's bed. The way she walked was so elegant and graceful, like a ballerina. I took off my headphones and grabbed the sheet of paper. It read, "Sleepover rules. Follow these rules to ensure you have a safe and happy sleepover. 1. Don't eat too much candy. They can smell it from miles away. 2. Do not leave the bedroom after 1:45 a.m. Please remember this rule, your life depends on it. 3. If you happen to wake up during the night for no apparent reason, hide under the bed within 25 seconds, that way they cannot see you. 4. Do not get snacks from the mini fridge during 8:56 p.m. and 9:47 p.m., you will not like what you find. 5. Make sure to turn off any light source apart from the TV, you must keep this on all through the night. I can't emphasize how important this is. 6. If you wake up randomly and see Jessie sitting upright, awake in her bed, run. Lock yourself in the ensuite and do not come out for the rest of the night. If Jessie knocks and says she hurt herself and needs help, ignore her, and do not reply. 7. If you wake up and hear the baby crying, ignore it completely, don't even move, it isn't the baby. 8. Do not attempt to speak to Jessie during the night, and if she speaks to you do not reply. This is crucial if you want to stay safe. 9. If you hear a dog whimpering and scratching on the bedroom door, drag Jessie under the bed and then hide behind the bookshelf. We do not own a dog. 10. If you hear a ringing in your ear, run, leave the house, this is the only exception, if you don't, we all die. Have a lovely sleepover, Tina smile. It had to be some kind of joke, these couldn't have been real, but I still have a gut feeling that I should follow these creepy-ass rules. I folded the piece of paper and placed it in my right pocket. Then sat down again to play with Jessie. After about an hour, Jessie's dad opened the door. It's bedtime, girls, you must go to sleep, now. I suddenly got very anxious, because this is when I had to start following the creepy rules. I held back all of my emotion because I didn't want to lose a friend like Jessie. Me and Jessie both got into bed. We top and tailed so my head was at the bottom end of her bed. Night, Tina. Sweet dreams. She said, in between yawns. I don't know how my dreams were going to be sweet after what I'd read. Surprisingly, I fell asleep pretty quick. My sleep was pretty deep, and I didn't have any nightmares like most nights. And that's when I woke up. My stomach sank. I turned to see Jessie sitting, upright, in her bed. Wide awake. I didn't want to believe that these rules were true, but my instinct was to just run. I bolted into the ensuite and locked the door behind me. After a solid few minutes of hyperventilating in Jess's ensuite, I decided to unlock the door. I thought it was all probably stupid anyway. Just before my hand reached the lock, someone knocked on the door. I froze. "Tina, help me. I've hurt my head and my vision's going blurry." I desperately wanted to open the door, but something in my head advised me against it. Jessie kept screaming for help. I slumped into the corner, shaking with every breath I took. She was screaming for hours. It was unbearable. Her voice got less human-like and more distorted with every screech. By the time she stopped, I was already half asleep, to put into perspective just how long her screaming went on for. I woke up. The light from the sun outside made my eyes sting. My ears were still throbbing. I slowly got up from the corner of the bathroom, and unlocked the door. Jessie was playing on her PS5, everything was totally normal. "Hey Tina," she said, in her usual jaunty tone. "I think your mom and dad are already outside waiting for you in their car." I couldn't take speaking, everywhere in my body ached. I picked up my stuff and started walking downstairs. Jess's parents waited at the bottom of the stairs to greet me. "Your parents are outside waiting for you, Tina," said her mother with a smile. "How did they get here so quickly?" It was only 8:45. I could see the open door, and my parents' car outside. I was so relieved. I was gonna leave this place finally. Jess's dad showed me out, and I hopped into my parents' car. I can't begin to explain how relieved I was to see my parents' smiling faces again. Jessie and her family waved at me as I drove away. "How was the sleepover, sweetie?" asked my dad. I was about to reply when I got a notification on my phone. It was a message, from my mom. It said, "Hey Tina. I was just messaging to ask what time you wanted me and your dad to pick you up from Jess's house. Smile." I looked back up at my mom, who was driving, and then to my dad, who was smiling airily at me. Shit. I forgot to leave on the TV. I felt sick to my stomach. "Forgot something?" asked my dad. It was a frosty October morning, the morning I found Albert's mangled remains, and I didn't yet suspect there was a direct correlation between my wife's folding addiction and his untimely demise. He'd been half buried in the woodland surrounding our garden, just beyond the vegetable patch. And staring down at the corpse, all I could think was, bloody hell, that's the third time this month. "Well, Albert Eggstein is dead," I announced, as I rejoined my family in the kitchen. "Foxes must have got him again," Carrie said from the breakfast counter, her back to me. "Not a chance. That coupe cost more than the damn car Houdini himself couldn't break in." At the far side of the table, Ben piped up and said, "It's the monster. I saw it outside my room the night Han Solo disappeared, remember Dad?" "There's no such thing as monsters, sweetie," his mother replied, setting down a cup of hot chocolate in front of him. With a cutting glance in my direction, she added, "Phil, animals live in forests. Some of them eat chickens." Mystery solved. Not wanting to kick off another fight, I ignored her tone and instead pointed out I'd already made Ben a hot chocolate earlier. "Yeah, but yours tasted weird," he replied, before drinking the new one in 2 gulps. Since his 10th birthday, that kid had practically been inhaling food. I said, "By the way, the pumpkins are looking ripe. What do you say we finally carve them?" After breakfast, all 3 of us worked on jack-o'-lanterns in the garage. Together, we made quite the trio, Ben with his green eyes and blonde hair, the old ball and chain sporting a thin build and dark complexion, and finally me, the freckly redhead. Just as I finished etching my stencil, Carrie clamped down on her own palm, juicy blood seeping between the fingers, 2 of which were already wrapped in plasters. "Silly me," she said, her voice all casual. My attempts to inspect the damage got brushed aside. "It's fine, I just nicked myself. I'll go get a bandage." "That looks pretty nasty. We should." "It's fine, Phil, I just nicked myself. I'll go get a bandage," she repeated, then disappeared upstairs. "Is Mom gonna be okay?" Ben asked. "She'll be fine, but you know her, just a bit of a klutz sometimes." Bit of a klutz was an understatement. My dearly beloved had this uncanny ability to injure herself under the most unlikely circumstances, whether by getting caught between a prowl of warring cats or dropping ceramic plates. Once the pumpkins were done, I marched upstairs and knocked on the door to her changing room. Footsteps shuffled down a creaky stairwell. A door inside Carrie's room brought you to the attic, the only way of reaching the third floor. When we bought the house, before Ben, she insisted on keeping that area for storage. In exchange, I got the garden. A key twisted in the lock, the door inched open, and then Carrie's head poked through the narrow gap. "What? How's the hand?" "It's fine. I'm not dressed." I pushed my foot beyond the threshold so that the door wouldn't close. "I don't mind," I said, with a cheeky grin. "Well, I do." Had I not reeled away, that door would have mashed all 5 of my toes. In order to maintain the delicate feng shui, Kerr's room remained strictly off-limits. She kept things neat and meticulously organized, especially clothes. 3 days later, while Ben and I played Fall Guys in the lounge, he out of nowhere said, "You'd never move to Australia, would you?" "Where's this coming from?" Gary's parents argued all the time and they split up. Now his dad sells surfboards in Australia. From the anxious expression, you could tell he'd given this matter some serious thought. His parents' compost heap of a marriage had clearly alarmed him. "I promise if I move to Australia, I'll take you with me. How's that?" Even after a friendly no, the poor kid still seemed upset. "Something else on your mind, bud?" He lowered his gaze, shivered. "I saw the monster again last night. It was watching me sleep from the hallway." My hand dropped onto his shoulder. "Hey, you know they're just dreams, right? The scariest thing you'd catch wandering around this house after dark is your mother and her face cream and hair rollers." After tousling his hair, I carried our empty chocolate wrappers and Pepsi tins toward the kitchen, but on the far side of the door, I froze. The needle I didn't feel, only a warm puddle growing beneath my foot. I bit down on a scream. As I hopped toward the bathroom, blood splashed all over the white floor tiles. Carrie appeared, said, "Oh," then followed me along with a dish towel, soaking up dark red pools. Sitting on the toilet, I struggled to get a grip on the slippery needle and, in the end, was forced to use a pair of clippers to twist it out whilst simultaneously reassuring a panic-stricken Ben there was no reason to panic. Annoyed, I said to Carrie, "How'd you manage to leave this scrap on the floor anyway?" "It must have dropped out of my sewing kit," she said, her rag wet and squelchy. Each time I took the pressure off my soul more blood gushed out. "I need you to drive me to hospital." "What, for this?" "Carrie, I'm leaking like a tap." "Fine." She disappeared into her inner sanctum for a quick change of clothes before driving me to hospital, where she complained incessantly throughout our 3-hour stay in the waiting room. "See? All that time wasted over a fucking bandage," she said on the drive home. I suppressed the urge to call her a heartless witch. In bed that night, the earlier conversation with Ben slid into my brain. My son suspected our family unit might wither and die. Surely the least I could do was attempt a little marital de-weeding? Over the coming weeks, each of my date suggestions, romantic dinner for 2, spa weekend, jazz cruise, were mercilessly shot down by Carrie, who insisted she either didn't have time or was too tired. How could anybody tend the emotional needs of a spouse that spent all day holed up inside their secret lair? One night, deciding I had nothing to lose, I chanced my luck at some romance by rolling over in bed and kissing along her bare shoulder. A drilling elbow to the ribs sent me careening back. "Not tonight." "There's a surprise," I muttered. This spurred her to flick on the bedside lamp. "What was that?" "Nothing." "Speak up, Phil. If you've got something to say, come right out and say it." Under my breath, I mumbled, "It's just lately I think you've been acting a little selfish." "Selfish?" That sure did it. After 5 minutes of furious finger-wagging and spittle hitting me in the face, a welcome distraction came in the form of a little rap at the door. "Ben, is that you?" He stepped into the room rubbing his eyes. "Did we wake you?" He nodded. "I'm sorry bud. Come on, let's get you back to sleep." I swung both legs out from beneath the blanket. "Can I have a hot chocolate?" With a weary sigh, I slid under the sheets again while he and his mother lumbered down the hall, and after he got his treat, She opted to disappear into her room rather than continue the stern lecture. The facts stared me in the face, plain as day. I'd become a doormat. A braver man, or perhaps one possessing some semblance of a backbone, might have bit the bullet and tossed the relationship into the compost heap. Sadly, I wasn't a braver man. I was, however, an exceptionally petty one. My revenge came in the form of discarded clothes left scattered around the house, either tucked behind the washing machine, under Ben's bed, or on the window ledge in the guest room. By morning, they'd all be meticulously folded and placed back in the proper drawers because Carrie couldn't control her obsessive compulsions. Was this act of defiance pathetic? Yes. But picturing her endlessly infuriated by the little seeds I'd planted gave me an immense sense of satisfaction. Sue me. While not busy with this secret project, any pent-up energy got channeled into the garden. Soon, there was an impressive produce collection: peas, leeks, sweet potatoes, even garlic, anything you could grow in a milder climate. And, even though he'd suddenly gone off strawberries, Ben became my dutiful helper. As the only child in the world who enjoyed maths homework, he had a good mind for figures, and so he kept track of the number of vegetables, along with when they'd be ready for harvest. Unfortunately, all attempts at instilling healthy eating habits were torpedoed by Carrie, who indulged him with hot chocolate 3 times a day. The Ice Queen mostly remained hauled up in her den, emerging to fold after dark, a true creature of the night. When not napping, she shuffled around like a zombie, and if she was clumsy before, her gracelessness reached a whole other level. Soon her fingers were permanently wrapped in bandages like an Egyptian mummy, her arms permanently bruised. At one point, after 3 days of silent treatment, she called me into the kitchen out of the blue. A spatula had become wedged inside the top drawer, preventing it from opening all the way. "I can't get it loose," she said. She put one foot against the wall and pulled with both hands. As I stepped closer to help, she lost her grip and crammed an elbow straight into my nose, producing a sickening crunch. "Silly me," she said, immediately holding a dish rag against my face. "Here, tilt your head back." Throat already congested, I rasped, "Carrie, what the hell? Quit being such a baby. Hold still until the bleeding stop." My free hand shivered the spatula sideways until it slipped out. "You couldn't have managed this yourself?" "Thank you," she replied, her voice a few notches short of genuine, before she gestured toward a document on the center island. "By the way, you need to sign that. It's the new life insurance policy. I've upped our coverage." "What? Why?" "Well, our trip to the ER got me thinking. You never know what might happen. You said it yourself, you could have bled out. Here, gimme the cloth, I'll chuck it into Washington." Later that day, I tiptoed around, turning the house into a bomb site of scattered clothes, a true arc de triomphe of disarray and disorder. But the following morning, the mess hadn't rearranged itself. Odd. Normally Kerr's radar homed in on even the most well-hidden items. This I dismissed as a rare-off night, but those lonesome socks and crumpled underwear refused to budge. Suddenly, I'd lost my release valve. All 3 of us sat down in the kitchen one morning, silent. As Carrie placed a hot chocolate in front of Ben, my eye happened across the top of her wrist, mostly hidden beneath the sweater. "What the hell happened to your arm?" "Nothing." In the split second I managed to reach over and pull back the sleeve before she wrestled it away, I glimpsed the beginning of a nasty mark, red and inflamed. It looked as though she'd been attacked by a rabid wolf. "Like hell nothing." "Phil, enough," she bellowed, loud enough that Ben flinched. That became my checkout point. There were 0 indicators our relationship might ever bloom again. My gut told me the 2 of us would trudge along, quietly draining the life from one another, until Ben departed for university. What I couldn't have known was how huge a red flag those unfolded clothes were, and just much danger we were in. It happened on a Saturday. Ben and I spent hours harvesting potatoes and tomatoes, then replanted seeds and trimmed stems, the works. At sundown we dropped the tools into a wheelbarrow, too sweaty and exhausted to tidy them away in the woodshed. After some TV, I ushered him upstairs into bed, and as I read him a bedtime story, his lower lip got all wobbly. Weird. It had been weeks since his last nightmare about the monster. "Everything okay, bud?" He avoided my gaze. I cupped his chin and used it to steer his head up. "Hey, You know you can tell me anything, right? Those teary eyes finally met mine. Well, I was wondering, you're not gonna walk out on me and Mom, are you? I closed the book. I'm not gonna lie, bud, your mother and I are going through a rough patch. But whatever else happens, I promise I'll always be there for you. You wouldn't disappear without telling me? Of course not. Why would you think that? Because Mom said you would. I stared at him, dumbfounded. Marital decay I could stomach, hell, I'd even accept 50% of the blame, but what gave that woman the right to poison my relationship with my own son? I stormed up to the makeup lounge and pounded the door so furiously hinges almost splintered. A hysterical Ben tugged my arm, begging me to forget what he'd said. Poor kid probably figured he'd as good as filed the divorce papers. I didn't tell him to leave. Part of me wanted him here as witness, selfish as that may sound. When the door finally shivered open, I demanded an explanation. I'm busy. We'll discuss this later, Carrie said, like her word was law. Rage bubbled up, deep inside the pit of my stomach. Again with the dismissal. How long could one man live like a eunuch? I pushed into the room, Ben clinging onto my shirt tail. Inside, there sat a makeup table with a mirrored front, cabinets, clothes hangers holding up fancy coats, and a sewing machine. Carrie stood motionless, veins pulsing along her forehead. Enraged, I said, "You're taking out new life insurance policies all while telling Ben I'm about to walk out? What kind of game are you playing here?" Just then, there came a metal groan from beyond the door at the top of the stairs. A hush fell over all three of us. Carrie's eyes flicked toward the attic, then she suddenly shifted gears. "You're right. Come downstairs, we'll talk things out." From the look on her face, she clearly had something to hide. But what could be up there? What could possibly be so important our marriage became a distant afterthought? "Now," she hissed. This piercing sound made me hesitate. What sort of reaction might she have to a direct act of disobedience? I reminded myself this didn't matter. My days of being a spineless weasel were done. I started up the stairs. "Ben, get back into bed now," she screamed. A locked door beyond the steps opened at a shoulder charge while, behind me, Carrie faked the world's most unconvincing panic attack, insisting she needed a doctor immediately. Inside the darkened space, a cord dangled beside my skull. At a pull a weak bulb blinked on, illuminating stacked boxes, clothes racks, and rickety furniture, a controlled, meticulously organized mess. I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. The air up there tasted stale, sickeningly warm. My better half stepped in front of me, her panic attack miraculously cured. "Now you know my secret. I spent too much money on shoes and handbags. I've got a secret credit card. It's maxed out, I'm an addict. Let's talk this out in the kitchen." At the far side of the room, beyond stacked boxes, metal jingled around. In response to this, Carrie stabbed her tongue inside my mouth. "Come to bed," she whispered. I held her shoulders and used them to steer her aside. Through a narrow gap there hovered a pair of eyes, regarding us from the shadow of the corner. I pushed away a tower of boxes and then froze. Before me lay some kind of torture hostage. A thin pale figure, barely visible in the gloom, wore a metal collar attached to the wall by a heavy chain. What the fuck? Had my wife been keeping an anorexic sex slave? For a moment I felt relief our love life had welted. Ready to channel months without intercourse into the ass-kicking of a lifetime, I stepped forward, but as I did Carrie threw herself in my way and laced her hand with mine. I didn't want any of this. "Nick," he manipulated me. I had no choice. "Nick? So this bastard had a name." "Carrie," I said, still in a state of complete shock, "this is..." As I took a second, harder look at the intruder, my voice died away. Those eyes glowed, two circles of green light in the outline of a skull marked by liver spots. Beneath pale skin vertebrae, cartilage, and muscle fiber shone through, connected by a network of blue and black veins. I didn't think anything so frail could possibly live, yet the concave chest went up and down in little heaves, the chain rattling away. "At first I could manage alone," Carrie continued. "I just let him have a little taste of my own every now and again. Or I'd fish tissues and clothes out of the bin whenever you got cut. He'd wander around the house at night, and nobody got hurt. but lately sustaining both him she hesitated, as though realizing what she was on the verge of saying. I just haven't been able to keep him satisfied. I hoped the chickens might do, but he said there was no substitute for human. And the less I could feed him, the more dangerous he became. Then he said I had to let him eat you. He said we had to get rid of you, but I refused because I love you. That's when he took a bite at me. She held up her wrist, the scars still prominent. So I locked him away up here to keep you safe, to keep us safe. A soft hand caressed my cheek while she reaffirmed her love, her right arm behind her back. Come downstairs. I'll explain everything. This pathetic act didn't fool me. When she made her move, I was ready. My hand caught Carrie's wrist in midair, the knitting needle halting mere inches above my left temple. Her eyes went wide with fear. The two of us stood there, my fingers sinking deeper into her flesh. She released the weapon which dropped onto the floor, and when she tried to wriggle free, I let go. Her momentum carried her across the room, toppling over a box of garments along the way, where her skull collided with the angled wall, hard. A red ink blot smeared across slanted wood boards as she slid onto the floor, directly beside her secret lover, whose nose twitched like a rabbit sniffing out a juicy carrot. He leaned over her, far as the chain would allow. Nick, she rasped while he hunched over her body, drawing long, satisfied inhales. Frail hands, capped by long curved nails, ran all over her damaged skull, and then the creature licked blood off its fingertips, groaning with delight. Every subtle movement carried this elegant, almost regal manner. His mouth opened, revealing long, curved fangs longer than cayenne peppers, fangs capable of stripping flesh off a live chicken. Groggy and confused, Carrie's eyeballs rotated up towards him. "Darling," she muttered. A single digit pressed against her lips. Her companion smiled. Then, those fangs plunged deep into her neck. Carrie shrieked, her body quickly draining any sort of nutritious element. She deflated like a balloon after someone released a stem, her squeals becoming raspy croaks, quickly melting away. This macabre display startled a shocked gasp from me. My feet remained rooted on the spot. Meanwhile, Nick's muscles flexed and writhed, his belly swelling. Blonde hair sprouted from the taut skull, his spinal column becoming less defined, the wrinkles less pronounced. Now he appeared almost alive, better ripened. As the withered husk vaguely resembling the lady I married slumped onto the floor, a voice behind me screamed, "Vampire!" This broke my paralysis. I spun toward Ben, whose cheeks were wet with tears. Oh shit. Even though this awful series of events made zero sense, I knew we needed to run, fast. I maneuvered him toward the stairs with a series of stiff, desperate shoves. From across the space, there came a metal groan and I glanced back right as the prisoner snapped the chain binding him to the wall with his bare hands. Although free, he didn't come after us immediately because colored garments lay spilled across the floor, collateral damage from Carrie's earlier tumble. My wife's lover scooped these up, began folding, and set them on an antique side table nearby. Holy shit. The cereal folder wasn't Carrie. It was Nick. Those dazzling eyes scanned me from head to toe, a long, forked tongue whipping across a thin set of lips. He appeared completely calm, like the idea of us escaping was simply unthinkable. The steps flew beneath Ben and I's feet. We charged past the makeup room, downstairs, along the hall, into the garage, only to discover a shadowy figure hanging from the rafters like a bat. How on earth did he move so fast? We frantically scrambled for the sliding glass doors at the back of the house, but outside, beyond the vegetable patch, the shadowy figure sat perched on a fence post, those glowing eyes silhouetted against the darkened forest. As a wintry breeze carried a cruel, quiet laugh across the garden, it occurred to me this cat-and-mouse game most likely delighted our pursuer. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. That left only one option. The wheelbarrow lay perfectly still 15 meters ahead of us. I ordered Ben to make a break for the woodshed. "But Dad," he protested. "Move." Heart pounding in my chest, I trampled over strawberries and grabbed the head shears and held them out defensively. A single leap made Nick sail straight over the vegetable patch. Before I even knew it, an icy claw clamped tight around my throat, the force driving me down amongst the broccoli, breathless. My hands unintentionally released the shears. Above me, a glistening tongue slid out to wet the grinning mouth. I glimpsed pink-stained teeth, hooked fangs. This was the end. Any second now that bastard would drain my body and bury the remains in the soil, like the chickens. A sharp nail cut across my throat, and then Nick sucked the blood off his finger with delight, eyes rolled back in his skull. "Oh, I'm going to make you pay for what you made me do to Carrie," he said. I was so hungry, I simply couldn't resist. He tapped his metal collar. "I want you to know, Phil, these chains were meant for you. Carrie and I planned on keeping you locked up as an inexhaustible supply of blood. But lately, the ravenous hunger, it simply became too much, what with Carrie rationing the food supply. So I agreed to be locked up while she got all the ducks in a row, and now look what unfolded. Well, at least my sweet cur-bear will know the man who forced me to feast on her flesh died screaming in." Out of nowhere, a child-sized object vaulted onto Nick's back and stuffed some kind of vegetable inside his mouth. This sent my opponent into furious convulsions. Only when I forced myself to sit up did it become clear Ben was paintbrushing Nick's face with a portion of garlic he dug out of the vegetable patch. The pair whirled around, a bulb half lodged inside the vampire's frothing mouth. He whipped his top half forward, simultaneously sending Ben airborne and dropping onto his knees, and hacked up a tidal wave of blood, both hands clutched around his own throat for relief. Fury washed over me. Having an affair with my wife was one thing, but nobody hurts my son, even the undead. In one smooth motion I jumped up and grabbed the shears and then charged forward with every ounce of strength I could muster, arms outstretched. Nick was too distracted to prevent the sharpened steel from piercing his chest, right where the heart would be. When I released the handles, they stuck out all by themselves. A death rasp went up. Expanding from the entry point, the bloodsucker's body evaporated like dust, peeling away in every direction across the torso, the breeze carrying the scattered remains away. Within seconds only the shears and metal collar remained, both of which dropped into the soil. It was over. A battered Ben staggered to his feet, his breath slow and choked. Pained even. I scooped him into my arms, then the two of us collapsed amidst the turnips, sobbing. For some time, I believed we'd escaped the nightmare, mostly, unscathed. The beast died, I'd escaped a toxic marriage, and, after a months-long investigation, the police conceded they had no idea where Carrie disappeared to. Sounds like a happy ending, right? Wrong. Over the coming weeks, Ben's appetite dwindled to the point he couldn't even keep hot chocolate down. The poor kid had so little energy, entire days passed without him so much as climbing out of bed. A series of dietary specialists were completely mystified. Then one morning, while he sat behind the breakfast table, I studied his blonde hair, those green eyes, and had a sudden, chilling realization. At the counter, I poured out a hot chocolate. Subtly, I pricked my finger with a needle, shook a few drops of blood into the cup, and stirred vigorously. Here went nothing. Ben took an apprehensive sip, slapped his lips together, and beamed. "This tastes great, just like the ones Mom used to make." And then I watched, horrified, as my son drained the liquid in a single gulp. www.reddit.com web link